This is the Persistence of Vision podcast. Welcome to the Persistence of Vision podcast, where every month I sit down with a creative professional, whether they be film or video production or advertising, any creative field. I like to sit down and talk with someone from that industry and get their life experiences, their career experiences, find out where things went wrong, find out where the mistakes were made, find those challenges, and then talk about how we've learned some lessons along the way. So I'm excited about my guest this month because she and I met professionally on set when I was working my day job, and she was on board as a costume designer. This is Augusta Rivera Campbell, and I wanted to bring her on because she works in a very niche part of the business as a costume designer. So Augusta, we call her Goose, so I'm going to call her Goose for the rest of the episode. I'm so glad you had a chance to come on our podcast tonight.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Clint. I'm so excited. Thank you.
We hear a lot from directors and cinematographers, and we hear a lot from the editors and the screenwriters. And so now this is a chance to really speak with someone who has a very special skill that I don't know, is it fair to say usually kind of goes unheralded in the business, would you say?
I think that we're getting more heralded, if that's even a word. I think that there's been a lot of attention paid to costume designers recently. And yeah, we're storytellers. I think if you ask anyone, a costume designer would say that he or she is a storyteller and tells story through costume. And many times before we even really get to know a character, or before a character opens his or her mouth, we see what they look like and we see what they're wearing, and that can be a very, very big part of who they are.
And I think as someone who's worked with costume designers before, and art directors, production designers, you don't realize just how many decisions you have to make until you're working with a costume designer, and all the little details that go into every choice that's made and everything that you see on camera. So maybe tell me a little bit about your experience in that regard. You know, this attention to detail that you have to have, and this observance you have to have as you're going into something like this.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. There's always so many questions. I always have so many questions. You know, when I first read a script, if it's going to be like a creative project, like what you and I worked on a whole lot together, you know, I think my questions vary. Like, you know, is this a confident character? Is this a character that's been through difficulty, or how has life treated this person? You know, any sort of indication of who they might be on the inside that I, as a costume designer, can bring outward in any type of clothing or article of clothing or item, anything special like that. Colors are a really, really big part of my storytelling. And that's something that I talk about a lot with directors. Like, you know, what colors do you see for this character? Or, you know, or I might suggest something. So I do ask a lot of questions, and I'm very grateful that you are receptive to those questions. Some directors aren't quite as open to the conversations, but I feel like, and I know that when the directors are more receptive, then I think the process just moves a lot smoother. I feel like the results are much better. With commercials, the same can be said. You know, it's a different animal, so to speak. But, you know, with commercials, we have like 30 seconds or 60 seconds or however many seconds to convey the message. And so a lot of times we do talk a lot about color, you know, and what the color impact is going to be with whatever these characters or actors are wearing. So, you know, I think the more questions, the better. I'm inquisitive anyway, and I like to talk and sometimes overthink these things, but I think the end result is better.
There are people that, like myself, who work in low to no budget independent productions, and oftentimes in that world, you can't afford to be picky,
right?
Because it's really just about what the actor has on hand that they can get, you know. But I will say, and I'm sure you would agree, even if you're working on low to no budget, I mean, don't ignore what the characters are wearing. You know, don't just let them show up with anything. And so maybe, like, to those that are listening who are in that world of just kind of scrounging things together, what advice might you give them as a costume designer to really don't be too hasty just to accept everything an actor brings to the table, but how can they still be true to their story and their characters even on a low budget?
Yeah, I think the first question that one would ask, or that I ask, is this relevant to the character? Does this add to the story, or does it take away? Like, does someone show up and have like a graphic T-shirt from like some band name or whatever, just as an example, and does that, what would the character wear that band T-shirt? Or it's things like that, those nuances. Working with background actors, like on shows or movies, whatever. I would always say, bring a light pattern, a soft pattern, bring a short sleeve, long sleeve dress, but like a little bit of variety that way that can be somewhat controlled. And over the years, I've amassed an inventory, and a lot of times I'll show up with my garment rack with a bunch of things that could work in case nothing works that the actor brings. But it's a lot of like, thinking on your toes, very, very much so, especially those lower budgets. But I also think the lower budget, no budget projects force you to be creative, and you think outside of the box so much. So I love it just as much as having a big budget. Honestly, to be truthful, I think all of it's kind of fun.
And personally, I don't know about you, but I struggle to answer these types of questions sometimes where someone says, well, how do you know that it's right? If you're directing something and your costume designer holds something up, do you like this shirt with this pattern? Do you like this shirt with that pattern? And the best I can say is just kind of trust your gut. Like, I think it comes down to being familiar with your script, being familiar with your material, knowing
Right.
exactly. I don't know that it's necessarily a teachable skill. I think it's just something that if you are embedded and immersed in that world, you'll kind of know instinctively, I think.
That, and also sometimes the actor has something to say. So it is a collaboration. And sometimes it happens in ways that you don't necessarily expect.
I want to back up a little bit and talk about your history, and how I always like to find out from people how they kind of fell in love with this business and first kind of got into it. So
Oh.
maybe kind of just share with us a little bit about your history with film production, how you got into this business.
I like to say that I got in by accident, but also it was the most intentional thing I think I've ever done in my life. My dad is a cinephile, and he like loves, loves, loves movies, Hollywood films, old Hollywood. So we would, as a family, on Saturday afternoons or Sunday afternoons or one evening during the week, we would watch movies together. And I saw brilliant films. I saw foreign films. I saw movies that I'm sure I was not really supposed to see it at the ages that I saw them. But, it was a love of film and a love of cinema. And I loved it all. I loved the acting. I loved the cinematography. I loved the sets and the locations, and I loved the clothes. And I think I just realized early on that I really loved clothing. And basically, I got my first step into photo video world by a chance, because a friend of mine that was doing this for a magazine didn't want to do it anymore because she was pursuing this cookbook deal opportunity. And I jumped right in because she knew I loved clothes, and I would help her with some of the writing, with describing the clothing, or with the designers or whatever. And that was it. I was hired by this magazine like 3 days before a photo shoot. I went and did it. And it's going to be 20 years that I did my first photo shoot. So that's kind of how the ball started rolling for me. And from there, I did a TV show came into town, and I got onto that, and I worked in the costume department with that, and short films started coming my way, and feature films started coming my way, and more commercials. So it just has grown so much in ways that I never would have dreamed. Never at all. So I got lucky, basically.
Aside from your biggest break, maybe what was that first big lesson that you learned? Like, oh, okay,
Oh,
now I understand about X, Y,
right.
or Z.
Right. So that happened on Bluff City Law, because everything I'd felt very comfortable with, like a photo shoot, sure, St. Jude, that was such a safe space for me too, and everyone was so happy to have me on. But Bluff City Law, like, no one knew me. I had to meet all new people. I had just joined our union, our local here, so it was a whole new world for me. And then it was a giant TV show that was coming to Memphis, and I had a good job in this department. And the gal that I was friends with, that I had come to know, said, I think that you would be great working on the truck with me. And I had never worked on a wardrobe truck before. And I didn't know those nuances. And there's zero training on stuff like that. Like, it's like, hey, here's what you do, go, and I had been lucky up until that point. And so the first day of filming, we had been putting in like these crazy hours, just prep, at least 16-hour days. First day of filming, I think I had to be there at like 4 o'clock in the morning. And I didn't leave until like, I think 1 a.m. the following morning. I remember on my paycheck, my first day was a 19-hour day. And that was a first. And just getting ready for that day, that first day of filming, well, I had to go set all the actors' trailers. So we had actors that were coming in first in the first round of filming, and then we had actors that were coming in later in the day. And I made sure everyone that was there, that had to be there first, had all their costumes ready, everything laid out, all the prep that we had done. That was fantastic. What I didn't realize was that I should have set all of the other actors' trailers also. It became evident that I'd made a huge mistake when we were filming, and I thought everything was great, going smoothly. And we see these actors that had reported, were on the clock. And they were just walking around base camp, and they were just in their regular clothes. And the first AD came flying into the wardrobe truck and was so mad and started yelling at me and at the actual truck manager, costume manager, about why aren't these actors dressed, and rookie mistake, and really yelling. And I didn't realize how big of a mistake I'd made, number one. Number two, I almost got the entire costume department fired. And I was like, I'm sorry, I'll go set their trailers. I didn't know it was such a big deal. In retrospect, he should have not had the actors come so early. And that was something that he later admitted. But that was when I realized, you know what? I can get fired and they'll hire someone else right behind me, and I'm not necessary on this job. And that was a big teachable moment. That was a really, really big teachable moment about how disposable one can be in the Hollywood side of things, for sure.
Bluff City Law, for those that maybe didn't see it, was shot in Memphis, and lasted 2 seasons, I think it was.
We had a 2-season. It was a 2-season deal, but then COVID. And so we've got 1 season, and it was great. Memphis really looked like a character in that show. They were very intentional, thoughtful about how to show Memphis. And it did end up being a really good experience.
Yeah. And so you're talking about, speaking of quick pace, you're talking about a weekly, network. It was on NBC, television series.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd done magazine work before. So, and so I knew it's you get this project done, and you take a breather for a minute, and then it's time to plan the next one. But when you're doing a TV show, especially while you're filming, while you're airing, we had the pilot. When we shot the pilot, we had 30 days to get that pilot right. And they put so much money into the pilot, and it was great. We had this wonderful designer and all this money in our hands and this giant budget for all the clothing, like Jimmy Smits wore Zegna, and he had custom made shirts from Italy, and it was a lot. We had 30 days to film that one episode. Once we were picked up and started airing, I think we had 8 episodes that we did, and we were filming an episode a week. So it was 5 days to get these episodes done, and it was just lightning fast. It was a pace that I don't know how I did it back then, and I don't think I could do it again today. That was 6 years ago, but we were, like I said, 14, 16-hour days pretty regularly, especially if you're on set. You have to be there early, and you're there until the last person leaves. So it was crazy.
So I'm just curious, you get your break, you start working in commercial work, you get some TV shows like this. Why, for you personally, why stay in Memphis? Why not go to LA and just pursue movies and big TV shows all the time?
Because for a while I was busy here. I love the TV work is the hardest, and I do like it. Once I started doing some films, especially feature films that were 21 days of filming or 28 days of filming, and you had this prep time, I was oh, this is what it feels like when I'm working on something creative that has a little bit of a budget, but I had the time to develop it. I like that a whole lot. And I love the commercial work. I love the commercial work. It's quick. It's like 3 days of filming, a couple of days of prep. I love the crews that come in from out of town. I love working with my friends too. Like they're all so different. And, I am a mom, and I was, raising my boys. I think if anyone had said to me that you could work in production work and still be a parent, I think 10 years ago, that would have been 50 years ago, that would have been difficult to accept. But the truth is, I was working on commercials. I could do 1 or 2 commercials a month and work for 8 days out of the month, and then have the rest of the month where I could dive into being a mom. And that's what I did. I could make the money with the commercials and spend the time I did. And it was crazy for a week or a week and a half. And then afterwards, I had all the time I wanted. And I could be with my kids. And so that was also part of my decision making. Like, if I were to move to LA or New York, I wouldn't have the time I have with my children. And, a lot of people say, oh, it's the kids. I'm like, you know what? I love that it was about my kids. We had a great time growing up and coming of age, and with mommy working on these commercials and stuff. They got to see a world that most of their friends didn't get to see. And they PA'd a couple of times on stuff, or would bring lunch for things. And I'm happy with that. I'm content with that. I've met some of these designers that are successful, and they've come in town, and not all, but a lot of them would say they don't get to have a life outside of work. And I see that a lot, especially with people in our industry. It's all consuming. And I like that we all know each other, and we have a pretty good community here, and we all have each other's backs. And I think it's fair to say that we have a pretty good quality of life living in Memphis and working in what we do.
So with this learning experience that you had on Bluff City Law, and kind of that eye-opening, like, I've always loved a good on-set nightmare story. So I don't know if that would be your worst experience.
It's pretty bad.
Or if there's another one that you can think of that that was just kind of really, where really things went wrong, and oh my gosh, and you think back on it like, oh man, what was I thinking? What happened? If there's anything else that you want to talk about.
I did make another great mistake. We were working on the Emmett Till story on the Women of the Movement show. Again, a big TV broadcast show, ABC. A brilliant designer had been hired for that. She was really, really good. She had just come off of a very successful show. And we were filming the courthouse scene where it was like the jury, and we were filming in the actual courthouse. So we were in Sumner, Mississippi during COVID, filming these scenes that were very, very heavy, and we all just felt just really, really badly afterwards. Whatever that was really probably the most emotional thing I've ever worked on. And there was a scene where I can't remember what happened. We were filming the 3 sisters that were the sisters of, I think, one of the accused men. I think that's what it was. And a costume got to the shop. I noticed that there was a mistake. I was like, this is a different film day. Like, this is a different story day. Why are they wearing the same costumes? Like, they have to be in something different. And so we went and we looked, and no one had laid that out for us at all. And normally what happens, Clint, is these costumes arrive, they have a tag, they have all the information, people know what they are. It's like dummy proof, except for this one day. And so we go there, and we are like in this panic. The camera is waiting on costumes, because I said, wait a minute, this is wrong. And we find the other costumes for the 2 sisters, and there's one main sister. She didn't have another costume. I was like, what is this? Oh my gosh, what is this? Like, and I saw a stash that I thought was part of her stash. So we just grabbed the dress, put it on her, went in there, and it was a disaster. The designer got so mad at me. It was horrible. And she got real mad at me and yelled at me in front of a lot of people. And as she was getting mad at me, like I had the fanny pack, my phone started ringing. It was on silent. And I remember looking down at my phone to see the name, and it was my oldest son. It was my son, John Henry, calling me. And I was like, you know what? This is going to be okay. This is what matters. My kid matters. Whatever this actress wore on this doesn't matter. Like it almost like levitated me out of the situation, because it was the reality of, you're a mom, you got a kid, he needs you, or he's calling for some reason. All this other stuff is dumb. It's just a TV show. And I like to remind myself, we are not curing cancer, except for the times when we are, or we're trying to. So that's also my mantra. So that was a pretty bad day at work too. She apologized later, but that was a really bad day also.
So what was the big mistake that you had made specifically for that in that situation?
That I grabbed a costume that wasn't approved, I guess, by the designer, even though it was one of her choices. And what I should have done was to get in touch with the supervisor, who strangely wasn't there. And I just should have called and should have figured it out, instead of me on my feet making the decision, which I'd done a million times before, doing all the other things that we do together, the indie films, the commercials or whatever. I just sort of like reached into that experience and applied it to this TV show. And it was a big mistake. So when a designer designs something and there's a costume that lands on the set, only she or he can change that costume.
So despite the challenges and the mistakes that have been made, that we've all made throughout our careers one way or the other, there's always that point, I think, where, I know it is for me, the low point, right? Where you kind of think to yourself, why am I still doing this? This isn't working out. I've got to pivot and do something different. I don't know what to do. And I was just curious, A, if there was a low point like that for you, and B, maybe how you worked through that in a way that maybe would give some encouragement to others that might be listening, that to kind of keep persevering.
The most difficult period, without a doubt, was the writer's strike for us, when there was nothing filming, not even commercials. Like it was almost 2 years of just not working. And I really had to let go of this whole costume designer dream that I had, because I knew that for someone my age, I'm not at this point, I'm not going to move to LA. I'm not going to move to New York, like what we had talked about, and I was just kind of, very lucky with the projects that I was getting. I felt very grateful for all that. But then when the writer's strike happened and all that came to a halt, I mean, I had to do something, I had to work. I had to do something mentally. I needed to get out of my house. Like I had cleaned up every room. I had done every home project. I had cooked so many things and frozen so many things. And my garden looked great. Like I just couldn't do it anymore. I had to work and get up out of bed and make money, because I like that a whole lot too. And that was when I was like, what am I doing? Why am I waiting around in this industry? Why am I waiting on Hollywood to come here? Why am I waiting on this when I have so much more to give and so much more to just contribute to the world in general, So that was definitely the worst when all that happened, and great that it's turned around and work was slow to trickle back into Tennessee. But it has, and like we mentioned before, the more people that come to Memphis, they really see our magic and they appreciate who we are as a city and who we are as a community, and they want to come back. And I'm starting to see people that are coming back or that are calling me again, and they're like, we worked together on this project or whatever, and do you remember me? I'm like, of course I do. And that's very satisfying. So I think, the boomerang is coming back around. So that's a good thing.
Because you made the investments early on, and this is for anybody, to not only just network with people and make connections with people, but also be someone that's easy to work with, be someone that others can count on. Because as soon as you work, like you talked about these people that are coming back to you now that have worked with you before, I mean, there's a reason that they're calling you back, right? And it's because you have a positive experience with that one person the first time. It's so easy. I mean, why wouldn't you call that person back? Why go through to start from scratch to find somebody else that you haven't maybe never worked with and maybe don't trust? So I think for anybody, like, it never costs you anything to be nice.
Yeah. I think of the people that I worked with that weren't nice or just, whatever. And I know that there's a certain generation too that's how they were treated. And now it's like, it's a thing, like it's like a Hollywood rite of passage when you're rude to the PA or you're mean to the smaller people in the department. That taught me very quickly of how I don't want to be if I'm ever in a position where I have leadership or I have a department working for me, an assistant or whatever it is, and also life is short. let's have fun. Let's enjoy our days. Are we doing what we really love to do? I know I am, and I want to have a good time doing it. And I know there's going to be days of stress and pressure. You just have to just not take it out on the people that are there to help you, and you're right. I think that we all had this great camaraderie, and especially with Memphis crew, and we all get along great, and we enjoy the days that we're at work together. And I think that it just makes life better. Just be nice.
Did you or do you have any mentors or confidants or people that you kind of looked up to that kind of helped you along in the industry, maybe earlier in your career, or maybe even people that you still go to and talk to about things?
Yes, I looked into the whole being a stylist and the photo shoots and that sort of thing, but I have very much to thank two wonderful ladies, Kat Ferris and Tess Nelson. They are the ones that kind of zeroed in on me. And when we ran, I met Kat at a film commission meeting, and we had to introduce ourselves when we're there. And so I stood up, I said, "Oh, my name's Augusta Campbell, and I'm a stylist or whatever." And Kat turned around and she looked at me. She goes, "I have heard of you, and I want to talk to you after this meeting." I was like, "Oh, okay." And she's like, "Listen, there's a big project coming to Memphis. No one really knows what it is just yet, but we need all the people that we can get to flesh out this costume department. We want it to be as local as possible. And I think that you might be really perfect for this. Why don't you have lunch with me and Tess?" And we're like, "Oh, okay." And I met them, and I have not let go of them since. And that was like 2019. We still all work together. I call Kat a lot for advice, and Tess. They both have had very long, successful careers, and they're doing a lot more of the Hollywood TV shows, of all of that world, than I am. But they have tremendous experience, and it's the same thing, Clint. It's just be nice. They reached out to me, and in a world that is so competitive, even within departments, we could have at any time competed against each other or not recommended someone for a job. That's the way it is with costumes. Like in this department, if I can't get a commercial, I'll say, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to be out of town, but let me tell you who would be so good at this." And I feel like just by recommending one another, it all comes back to you. We all help each other out. And there are going to be times when we're working in a department and we feel like the entire film is against us, whether it's the director or the producers or something. There is something to be said about having each other's backs and feeling like that we're in something together. And those two women, Kat and Tess, they laid the groundwork for me with these bigger Hollywood budget type of projects. And I'm very grateful for them because they changed the trajectory of my career.
So, for those that might be listening, maybe they're in costume design, or maybe they just want to get into the film industry in general, I would ask what advice you have for them in terms of getting your name out there within the film community, whether that is getting on a film office directory, or how you went about doing it, or how
Yeah.
you would advise others to do it.
Yeah, I think here locally, if you go to the film commission, they're very supportive of crew, and just talking with people at the film commission, that's always super duper helpful. And so many people that are PAs all want to be something else, so find your PA world, and that's such a supportive community too. And they help each other out so much. I think just be persistent and know who you are and know what your boundaries are. That's really important. And gosh, just be a team player. Just be a team player, and don't stab people in the back because you want a job.
So, what advice might you give to directors, whether they are veterans in the industry or whether they are new and have never done anything like this before?
Mhm.
What advice would you give to those that are in that seat that are working with costume designers? What do they need to consider or know or think about?
I think with directors that are seasoned, I think I would say maybe just keep learning and keep your mind open and keep the conversations going with your costume designer. And sometimes I would hear things like, "It really doesn't matter what they wear." And I'm like, "Why would you even have a costume designer then? Like, if you think it doesn't matter." So things like that, like just sort of just know that when directors speak, their words matter. And when they're speaking to a department head, we're all here to support that director's vision. So it's something that I take very seriously. With a younger director, I would say a similar thing. I would say just be open to the lessons that you're learning and be open to how, the ecosystem of a crew is, and um what every person's role is, because as you know, every single person has a job and every single person is as important as the next. And the director sets the tone on the set and for the film. And whether you're a former director, or a director with a lot of experience, or a new director, just understand that you set the tone. You set the tone, and that's going to come from the top.
And along those lines, I was thinking about just the different types of personalities you find on set, regardless of the project that you're working on. So obviously, you have probably worked with directors and creative directors that are a little more loose with what they feel is right for the shot. That they may say, "Oh, I like this. Yes, this is perfect. Let's go. Let's shoot it. This is good." But then there's going to be those other directors that are very, very specific and ultra picky and ultra demanding. So I'm wondering, kind of, in your experiences, how you've navigated both situations.
Right, right. Well, with those picky guys, I always like to say, well, what's the budget? Like if you are really, really picky about something, you want something really specific, then how much money do you have that I can make this happen for you? And if there's the budget doesn't support what the vision is, then we got to get creative, and you got to kind of loosen up some of your boundaries. And that's kind of a nicer way to put it, because I think it puts things in perspective immediately. Like if you want me to have a specific costume that has like a certain number of buttons, like what you were saying, like a certain period piece, it has to be authentic and perfect. Well, that costs money. So, there's that. And then if someone just doesn't, always says, "Oh, this looks great," whatever. I mean, it's almost like a different type of problem, because I do like to have some direction so that no one can go back and say, "Well, I mean, it wasn't my idea," or "She really did this or that." Like, no, 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 no. I don't believe in steamrolling anyone for an idea. Or there are very few times that I might be persistent on something and say, "I really believe we need to do this." But that's only happened like one or two times. I mean, a lot of times I do feel like it's a collaboration, like we talked about earlier, so with the either extreme, I think you just have to just know what your limitations are.
We've talked about kind of the low points, the mistakes, but now let's reverse it. Maybe what's the best project you've worked on, or the most the proudest moment that you've had, you think?
Oh, I mean, I'm proud of the things I've done for these big networks and stuff, because it is nice to say, "Oh, I was on this or I was on that." It looks great on the resume. But to be honest, like I love the indie world. I love doing the short films and all that. Like that to me is just, it's just like you said, it's creative storytelling at its best. We're telling the story that's written on the script, also with all the nuances that can happen while we're filming or before we're filming, like all the things that you got to kind of like throw up in the air sometimes and catch. And that to me is the best. That's just so satisfying. I love it. I love working on a set where everyone gets along great, where everyone is so excited to be with each other, where like lunchtime is fun, where going to Crafty's fun because you're seeing all your friends. Like that energy is so, so great, because we're all there for the same thing. Like when you're with the hair and makeup people, their job is to create the character also. When you're there with the production designers or the art directors, their job is also to tell the story. So we're all there for the same thing. And when we're all so appreciative of it, that's like the best feeling in the world. The absolute best feeling.
The more you can learn about what everybody does,
Mhm.
and I'm not saying you have to be an expert at it,
No.
but just to chat up somebody
Yeah.
and ask them a few questions about what
Yeah.
it is they do, to
Yeah.
get a greater appreciation for their job. I think the more informed you are,
Yeah.
the better the environment can be on set for everyone. The better decision maker you'll be, the better communicator that you'll be. So I think back to I often think back to that those days in theater, learning all about costumes and then sound design and other things
Yeah,
that have
right,
informed me even
right,
today.
right. Like talk to the grips, talk to the sound guy, talk to transpo, see what everybody does, like catering, crafty. They're all important.
Goose, I never want to end an episode without giving my guests a chance to plug anything that they're working on or something that they want to share or some place where we can find you online. So what is it that you're most excited about right now?
Well, we worked a little while ago on this great commercial for St. Jude, and it aired during the Super Bowl. So it was a very proud moment. It was a lot of fun coming up with all of the costumes for that. It was football themed. It was lots of happiness and joy and great colors and again a great crew. So that was a lot of fun. And just finished up working on a film that took quite some time to film here. It's a feature called The Last Story of David Allen, and we started filming it about a year ago, and it took a long time to get the initial principal photography done. We picked up some more scenes at the end of the year, and I think that's wrapped up, and hopefully we'll be seeing it sometime soon.
Augusta Goose, costume designer extraordinaire, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Clint. I appreciate it so much. Thank you. It was so much fun.
Okay, thanks so much. Bye.
Okay, bye.
And that was my conversation with Augusta Campbell. She has been such a delight to work with over the years that I've known her. She's always attentive, always hardworking, always asks the right questions to make sure that what she's bringing to the production is of the highest quality. If there's one thing that I'm taking away from the conversation is that, creativity isn't limited to big budgets, fancy sets. It's about asking the right questions. It's about collaborating with your team and, building that trust. If you're enjoying this podcast, I hope you will leave a review and recommend it to someone else. You can subscribe to this podcast and this newsletter. You can check it out at clinttill.substack.com. There I write my own personal stories throughout my career in film and video production, and you can subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to see what I'm posting online and everything that I'm doing, you can connect with me at linktree.com/ClintTill. Thank you so much for listening this month. I'll be back next month for a brand new episode. You've been listening to the Persistence of Vision podcast.